She saw me first.
And that was love at first sight, because he was leaning over a sink putting in his contact lenses, and I walked by and then I went, ooh. Didn't know those buns belonged to Frank.
My interview with Kathy Lee and Frank Gifford turned out to be enormously popular with our audience and a bit surprising. Probably because everyone assumed that Kathy Lee would do all the talking. And in the end, I think Kathy Lee and the rest of us were caught off guard by how her husband really stole the show. And wait until you see their house. In a moment, Frank and Kathy Lee Gifford.
Barbara Walters is sponsored by Lexus.
At first glance, Frank and Kathy Lee Gifford seem to have little in common. He's the strong, silent type. She's energetic, emotional, and electric. But they share many things, starting with their birthdays. Both were born on the same day, August 16th, but 23 years apart. Frank Gifford was born in 1930. He was the son of an oil rigger who moved his family between boom towns across the Southwest and California. Frank was always the new kid on the block, always having to prove himself. He did it with football. An athletic scholarship to USC paved the way for Frank to become an All-American offensive defensive back. He was also one of the best-looking men ever to run with a football. In 1952, he was picked as the #1 draft choice of the New York Giants and began his Hall of Fame career leading the team to division and world championships. At the same time, across the Atlantic, Kathy Lee Epstein was born, the middle of 3 kids, in 1953 in Paris, France. Her father was a Jewish naval officer, and her mother a Christian fundamentalist. Since Dad never practiced Judaism, Christianity dominated their Maryland home.
We're here to find out who.
Her eclectic career started with winning Maryland's Junior Miss Pageant, and then taking the Kraft Hostess Award in the national contest, where she got to star in her first commercial.
I think advanced planning is the key to any great party, and with Kraft Foods, that's super easy.
Frank, on the other hand, had a setback. In 1960, a killer tackle nearly took his life. It should have ended his career, but he came back 14 months later and played one of the best seasons of his life. Nothing could keep the Gifford down. Or, for that matter, the woman who'd later become his wife. At that Junior Miss Pageant, Kathy Lee met Anita Bryant, who took her under her wing, getting her a singing scholarship to Oral Roberts University. In 1976, she married gospel musician-composer Paul Johnson, but it was a loveless marriage, and after 5.5 years, he left her. But not before she had found her true voice in the secular world. La, 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 la. Kathy Lee became the La La Girl on Name That Tune, which brought her a string of national shows that put her on the cusp of stardom.
Good morning, I'm Frank Gifford with Kathy Lee Johnson.
But most importantly, she became a fill-in host on Good Morning America, where one Thanksgiving she was seated alongside another substitute, Frank Gifford.
Good morning.
It was not love at first sight. In fact, it took about 2 or 3 dozen sightings, but 4 years later, they tied the knot. By this time, Frank had moved from the football field to the sportscaster's booth. Fans know him best as the cornerstone of ABC's Monday Night Football, where he's been for over 2 decades. Meanwhile, talk show host Regis Philbin was doing a local morning show in New York. After several years of playing musical co-host, Kathy Lee was hired. She was the perfect foil for Philbin's demonstrative personality, and the ratings improved immediately. When Live with Regis and Kathy Lee went national, she found a receptive audience from coast to coast. Certainly, the Gifford clan has missed few opportunities to capitalize on their fame. There have been numerous books, commercials, a clothing line, a nightclub act, albums, and a fitness video. In 1990, the couple's first child was born, Cody Newton Gifford. This was actually Daddy Frank's 4th child. He was married twice before, but this was the first child he says he's really had enough time for. When we spoke in 1992, Cody was 2.5. and their devotion to him was contagious.
Cody likes this one. I like Cody.
Their home was this lavishly remodeled and expanded Connecticut farmhouse on several lush acres. Plenty of room for Fort Cody. Plenty of room for the pet pigeons frisés, their names Chardonnay and Chablis.
Who are you now
Kathy Lee says that the only thing she's sure she did well was decorate. Her living environment was a decorated showplace, from the bright music room to the warm dining room and atrium, to the living room, which was actually the oldest room in the house, dating back to the 1760s.
I never thought Frank Gifford would want to sleep in this kind of a bed, all frou-frou and Philly. He wakes up and goes, Kathy, this is the prettiest room in the whole world. It makes me feel so great.
Since we spoke, the Giffords have welcomed their second child, a daughter, Cassidy Erin Gifford, born in 1993.
The truth, okay? Do you watch Kathy Lee every morning?
I try not to. I don't have to watch it. I hear about it wherever I go.
Do you watch Monday Night Football every Monday?
Until we had a little boy, I did, didn't I, honey? At the very beginning. Things have changed a little around here, Barbara. We still love each other a lot, but we're more realistic about our relationship. When we were first together, first in love, Frank would rent anything that moved just to get home to me quickly. I would stay up, have a bottle of wine chilled, be in a negligee all powder puffed. Now it's like, and he comes in whenever he can.
Should also know the score when I got home, too.
Oh, now I have to ask my prop guys in the morning, who won?
Yeah, just in case he asks. Why do you feel that you have to discuss the most personal things? Is it just because you're with Regis? Is it a new unit, or were you always like this?
It's part of it, Regis. He brings out the worst in me. And yet I love it that he does, because it's fun. I would never do anything that I knowingly would hurt Frank or anybody else.
In your autobiography, you say, I pray every morning, Lord, please don't let me hurt anyone with my mouth. Do you really get up every morning and say that?
I don't get up before I say it. Before my feet hit the ground, I say it, because I know this mouth very well, and I know what it's capable of. And I think if you know the heart behind the mouth, you can sort of accept it. And I think if somebody who doesn't know me very well turns on the tube and hears me talking, I mean, they go, what the heck is this? I guess it could be a little heavy for some people.
Do people write in and say, shut up about the kid already?
That's really the only major criticism I get. So for every one person who writes to me and says, I'm sick to death of hearing about Cody, I must get 1,000 letters from people say, oh, every time you show a picture of Cody, it reminds me of my child or my grandchild.
Did you like Regis when you first met him? And you didn't?
Too fond of him now, are you, sweetheart?
I didn't know him. I'd seen him in many places. In L.A. I used to watch him occasionally out there. I didn't like the way he, there were so many little innuendos in the way he exchanged things with Kathy. And this was, you know, really, we hadn't started going together even. And it was, it bothered me a little bit. And then we were going together. Then we were engaged, and then we were married. And one day he did say something that I didn't like, and I went to see him about it. And it wasn't a big blustery thing or anything. I just suggested that maybe if I were to say the same thing about his wife Joy, that maybe it wouldn't be, he would maybe understand how I felt about it.
That was the best way to approach it, because Regis did understand it. He was great about it.
He was genuinely hurt. I mean, he didn't realize that either that he was doing it or that I would be affected by it like that.
How do you feel about Regis now?
Oh, I like him a great deal. No, he's a wonderful, kind, charming person.
Let's talk about the two of you. It was not love at first sight. It really was a long, well, you tell me about it. A long
Well, it
courtship.
wasn't, she saw me first.
And that was love at first sight, because he was leaning over a sink putting in his contact lenses, and I walked by and then I went, ooh. Didn't know those buns belonged to Frank.
I was filling in for David Hartman, Good Morning America. And Kathy was working on Good Morning America, and I'd watched her on the show, and I knew that this got to be the most perky thing that I've ever seen in my life. And she had this funny haircut, you know. She looked like Bobby Orr, the hockey player. I called her Helmet Head.
Yes, we got along just great at the beginning.
I could not believe anyone could be this up. You know, done Good Morning America. I would rather do it on the way home than get up and go do it.
I did the Today Show for 15 years. I was up, but I wasn't perky.
Yes, unbelievable. And she was always, and she made everybody happy. And over a period of several years, I tried to fix her up with a couple of my best friends. And contrary to what has been written and reported, we were not having an affair. It was not even so much of a thought of one. And then I was going through a divorce, and finally when that was finalized and she broke up with her friend for about the umpteenth time, I said, look, why don't you just hang out with me for a little bit, and we'll get our feet on the ground, and what was it, I guess...
You know, your words were, I'm not... And you'll just hang out with me for a while, so you won't go back to that jerk. He's not a jerk, he just wasn't right for me.
I might have used a couple of other adjectives, too. But I think it was, what, about 4 months later we were married. And
Well, yeah.
we never looked back.
22 years difference in your ages?
23.
23.
Exactly.
You're kind.
People like you and me have to stick together, friend. Did it bother you? Does it bother you?
Never, ever did. Not until we had Cody did we even think about it, because when you have a daily reminder of a child's age, you just can't help but start adding the years in terms of when he graduates from college.
Did you want this little boy? Did you want a baby?
No.
You had grandchildren.
It's hard for me to hear him say that.
No, well,
I know it's
no,
true.
she asked me if I wanted him then.
I know you want him now.
And what I could not say to her is don't have this child, nor did I, and I told her that. I said, I can't tell you not to. I have 3 children, and now I have 5 grandchildren. At the time I had 3. And I said, I really don't need another child in my life. And laughingly, but she knew how I felt about it, but I also told her, I could never, ever tell you not to, nor will I. That's your choice. You deserve that in life, and that's what she wanted. And it was one of the great blessings in my life. And the downside, of course, is I won't have all of the years that a lot of people would have with their children. I know that. But hopefully I'll have enough that he will know, and maybe even see this show someday, how much that I really love him, and how much I wish him all the happiness that you can have in this world.
Do you want another child, Frank?
That's why they say
I
she
know
asks
she
the tough
does.
questions.
We both, the biological clock is ticking. Mine's already talked, but hers is ticking.
You did pretty well, frankly.
Well, fortunately for me, it doesn't work the same as for you, but she would like to have another baby. Again, that is her decision.
Next, Kathy Lee on her first marriage.
Kathy, many people don't know that you were married before, and that you married a man who was a gospel music composer named Paul Johnson.
Yes.
It sounds like a cold and empty marriage when one...
Yeah.
Yes.
It was a great friendship that should have remained a great friendship. It was a terrible marriage for both of us. We were both too young. We didn't know each other well enough. What we had in common was our faith, and that's not enough for a good marriage.
You write about this marriage, and as you write about it, it sounds as if you never had any sexual relations.
We attempted it. We tried to have that kind of a life together, but it just didn't happen for us. I think there are a lot of loveless marriages where there might even be affection, but it's not a passion. It's like it is with Frank and myself. Thank God I know what that's like now. I didn't know what it was like in that marriage.
And it lasted 6 years.
Lasted 6 years.
And he left you.
I came home and half of our belongings were gone in our home. And there was a little note from him on the kitchen table saying why he had left. So we became legally separated, and by that time, very few marriages, once you're legally separated, go back together.
Then after your divorce, you went through a period in which you say you really couldn't stand yourself.
I was so disappointed in myself.
Why?
Because I let my standards down. I went out with people that didn't share my faith, that didn't have life goals that I had. I think I'd lost self-respect, And I think we all do stupid, idiotic things when we lose respect for ourselves. And that's the beauty of what happened with me and Frank. We both were like wounded birds when we finally fell in love. And we healed together. And I not only fell in love again with a man and could trust again, but I fell in love with the Lord all over again, too. I'll never forget the first time we went to church together. And it was so honest, what we shared together, and it was a rediscovery. He's so sweet to me. I don't deserve this, but I'm keeping him anyway.
Listen, this is going to be one of the few interviews in which I cry. I want to ask you a question that I ask often on interviews. What was the best time, I assume, is now, right?
It's awfully good.
Yeah.
I think Frank would, if he were really honest, would say the best time was the first year or two of our marriage.
That was great.
It's hard
We
for
were
him now
alone.
not to have me completely to himself.
Yeah.
We just sacrificed everything
I didn't want
for
her to
each
do
other.
the show. I wanted her to leave the show. And she...
When?
So, when we knew we were going to get married. It was a wonderful thought, but now that I think about it, it was one that kind of a thought you have when you're just wildly and crazy in love. And it was, Kathy has got to perform, and she had the opportunity to express herself, and she has incredible talent. And for me to take her away from that theater and that stage, that would have been wrong.
Well, what about today when she's doing everything? Commercials, and public appearances, and a book, and an album, and the show every day, and the dress line, and the...
And
what have I
cooking and
left
cleaning.
out? Oh, too
I
much?
don't like it. But it's almost like what we said about her having a baby. I mean, she has her life, too.
You wanted to stop?
I would like her to curtail a lot of it. Half the time she's exhausted.
He's right. I'm not enjoying it.
Could you stop working?
I couldn't stop working completely, no, but I could curtail it.
You've said that you hope Cody never plays football.
I really don't want him to play. Maybe that's... I don't want to preach that because I think it's a great game. But for me, I would just as soon he didn't play.
Why?
It's a violent game. There's no question about it. And I hate to say that word because people say violent. But the young people who play it, they can endure things that you couldn't, Kathy couldn't, other men couldn't who've never played it. They don't understand it. But when you have played the game and you have caught your cleats in the turf or something, somebody's hit you from the side, and you feel the ligaments tear out of the bone. Those are the things you don't want a son to go through.
And if Cody said to you, I'm going to play football, would you?
I'd say, go into show business. It's a little less dangerous.
If he wants to play, I'll let him play. Let's put it this way. I'm not going to put a helmet on him and say, go knock somebody down.
Do you remember one day I said, what's the biggest misconception
Yes, I
about
do.
you? Remember what you said?
That because I'm happy, therefore I must be shallow. Yeah. I'm so tired of being misrepresented, and the more successful you become in life, whatever success means to people, I think everybody has a different definition of it, the more you seem to lose control of your own life.
Is it also, do you think, some of the criticism because you look up to him, because it's, you know, you seem to...
Anybody in their right mind would look up to Frank Gifford. I don't look up to every man. I look up to this man. He has more qualities in him that I respect than anybody besides my dad and my brother, men that I've known and loved my whole life, that I can think of.
Frank Gifford, 10 years from now, where do you see yourself?
Probably Philadelphia, Dallas. They'll be 3-3. I hope.
I hope so.
We'll be getting about a 25 rating. Oh, Barbara,
hope
10 years.
so.
You know, I've never made any major plans, career-wise, and I think you probably would understand it. Things happen to you that you have. Something could happen tomorrow. Who knows? I'm going to have a lot of fun with Cody. I know that. I'm going to share some wonderful moments with Kathy. Hopefully, I'm going to watch my grandchildren grow up a little better, a little more closely, and I hope physically I'm in good shape to enjoy it all.
Kathy, 10 years from now.
It's so hard to divorce myself from what I'd like to be doing creatively and what I'd
Still
like
with
to...
Regis?
Oh, I hope not. I'm just kidding. Just kidding, Reach. You know, Reach, no matter what happens, if the show ends tomorrow, he will be my friend for the rest of my life, and so will Joy. So I don't feel like I'm ever going to lose Reach in that sense. I still have dreams to kick up my heels on Broadway. I wouldn't do that now until Cody's in school, and I mean, I have creative dreams still that
She's
are
cutting back, as you can see.
Oh, I can see that, sure.
But I'd also like to have another
sitcom.
child. I hope he's still very much in love with me. Somebody said to me the other day, "Oh, you're so successful now, Kathy." I said, I will be successful maybe 12 years from now when Cody has gone through puberty and he's a wonderful human being. He's compassionate, he's generous, he's funny, and he still wants to go to bed with me and still thinks I'm the sexiest thing in the world and still loves me in the morning. I mean, that's success. Relationships are what make you successful.
Do you have a song that's his favorite or your favorite?
Tell me if this is the
You'll love
one.
it, too.
Tell me if
you're
this
right.
is
You're right.
I can only give you love that lasts forever, and the promise to be near each time you call, and the only heart I own for you and you alone. That's all. That's all. That's all.
That's it.
That's all.
My name.
When I interviewed two people who love each other, an interesting thing sometimes occurs. They move very close together and protect each other. As a result, the chance of getting two people to open up should be twice as hard. But it isn't, because sooner or later one will say something that the other feels needs clarifying. And then you just sit back and watch. The more different they are, the more interesting it is.
She saw me first.
And that was love at first sight because he was leaning over a sink putting in his contact lenses, and I walked by and then I went, ooh. Didn't know those buns belonged to Frank.
My interview with Kathy Lee and Frank Gifford turned out to be enormously popular with our audience and a bit surprising. Probably because everyone assumed that Kathy Lee would do all the talking. And in the end, I think Kathy Lee and the rest of us were caught off guard by how Stein was born, the middle of three kids, in 1953 in Paris, France. Her father was a Jewish naval officer, and her mother a Christian fundamentalist. Since Dad never practiced Judaism, Christianity dominated their Maryland home.
We're here to find out who.
Her eclectic career started with winning Maryland's Junior Miss pageant and then taking the Kraft Hostess Award in the national contest, where she got to star in her first commercial.
I think advanced planning is the key to any great party, and with Kraft Foods, that's super easy.
Frank, on the other hand, had a setback. In 1960, a killer tackle nearly took his life. It should have ended his career, but he came back 14 months later and played one of the best seasons of his life. Nothing could keep the Gifford down. Or, for that matter, the woman who'd later become his wife. At that Junior Miss pageant, Kathy Lee met Anita Bryant, who took her under her wing, getting her a singing scholarship to Oral Roberts University. In 1976, she married gospel musician-composer Paul Johnson, but it was a loveless marriage, and after 5.5 years, he left her. But not before she had found her true voice in the secular world. Her husband really stole the show. And wait until you see their house. In a moment, Frank and Kathy Lee Gifford.
Barbara Walters is sponsored by Lexus.
At first glance, Frank and Kathy Lee Gifford seem to have little in common. He's the strong, silent type. She's energetic, emotional, and electric. But they share many things, starting with their birthdays. Both were born on the same day, August 16th, but 23 years apart. Frank Gifford was born in 1930. He was the son of an oil rigger who moved his family between boom towns across the Southwest and California. Frank was always the new kid on the block, always having to prove himself. He did it with football. An athletic scholarship to USC paved the way for Frank to become an All-American offensive defensive back. He was also one of the best-looking men ever to run with a football. In 1952, he was picked as the #1 draft choice of the New York Giants and began his Hall of Fame career leading the team to division and world championships. At the same time, across the Atlantic, Kathy Lee Epstein